Whenever a score is awarded to a karateka, he or she could have knocked out or at least knocked down their opponent, but chose not to. We have this rule called mubobi, which describes self-endangerment. If I were to fight in a boxing or MMA match, and I hit my opponent at the back of the head hard enough that I knock him out, should I be allowed to win? In semi-contact kumite, strikes to the back of the head, the neck and the throat are allowed, but it has to be controlled. Control is a very crucial aspect in traditional karate. Is there a good justifiable reason to restrict the world from having a safer option?
This is a continuation of part 1. If you haven't watched that video, you may want to watch that one first to provide context for this part.
The finals of 75 kg and above men's kumite was between Hamid Tariq of Saudi Arabia in Aka or red corner and Ganzadeh Sajjad of Iran in Au or blue corner. As the Iranian moved into attack with a gyakuziki or the reverse punch with his left hand, left his head unprotected while moving to the right and downwards. In response, through reflex, the Saudi Arabian fighter kicked with his left leg, that was his front leg, connecting directly at the jaw, with both the head and the feet moving towards each other, resulting in a knockout of the Iranian. The referee decided to disqualify the Saudi Arabian fighter, earning Iran the Olympic gold medal. So there are three main issues surrounding this controversy. The first issue is within the karate community itself, questioning whether the referee and judges made the right decision within the WKF rules. The second issue is within the martial art community, stating that this semi-contact rule is bad for the martial art or for karate. And the third issue are statements implying that this incident demonstrates that karate is ineffective. I will not be talking about issue number 1, as it does not address the title of this video. So I'll be putting that in another video. So do subscribe to look out for that. Watch that bout or that incident and concluded that karate techniques, punches and kicks are ineffective. I'm led to believe that you have predetermined conclusions even before you started watching. What this actually demonstrates, logically, is that whenever a score is awarded to a karateka, he or she could have knocked out or at least knocked down their opponent, but chose not to. I don't know how much more obvious that can be, or how much more straightforward I can be on this point. This is not a unique case. You could go to YouTube and search for WKF knockout. And the reason for this is the 6 scoring criteria that I quoted earlier. These criteria incentivize effective scoring techniques and does not reward ineffective techniques. The only difference between controlled scoring techniques and the foul techniques resulting in knockouts or knockdowns is not power, it's penetration. The power is there all along. The difference is whether you pull back before or beyond the surface of the target. Bruce Lee used to fool around with his friends, doing jumping spinning kicks at them, flicking them at the ear with his feet. Does this mean that he's incapable of fully extending, following through with a knockout kick? Of course it doesn't. Surely he's capable of that. The same goes with these kumite athletes in WKF or Olympics. Bruce Lee did this to test his own amazing skill of precision and control. This is what karate athletes do in every bout. That is the level of precision, of control, of athleticism that you see in karate. You would not see this level of precision, speed, low telegraphy, control, and sufficiently powerful strikes if these karate athletes did not train in a semi-contact format. The reason why karate punches do not look that strong is because 1, we don't swing, and number 2, we pull back. However, the power of the punch is not dependent on whether you pull back or not. It's dependent on penetration and, of course, speed and mass. Once you've achieved speed, mass and penetration, whether you pull back or not no longer makes any difference. Beyond a certain point, further penetration no longer adds impact, it only pushes. Are karate strikes the most powerful among martial arts? Certainly not. Semi-contact format does not incentivize continual improvement of striking power. They incentivize continual improvement in speed and distance with sufficiently powerful strikes. The logic behind this is if you watch boxing or MMA, you notice that it is not the most powerful punch that results in a knockout or a knockdown. It is the sufficiently powerful punch that lands when the opponent don't see it coming. That is, at the right spot and at the right time. If you're not convinced, here's another thought experiment. Could you go up to these karate fighters and challenge them to a bout while being confident that their strikes will not hurt you? So, issue number 2. Is semi-contact rule bad for the martial art? The first concern is whether this ruling system encourages fighters from not protecting themselves. The answer is yes and no. Yes, because it happens often. No, because nobody wants to concede a point. And no again, because we have this rule called mubobi, which describes self-endangerment. I quote from the rule book again. Self-endangerment by indulging behavior, which exposes the competitor to injure by an opponent or failing to take adequate measures for self-protection, or mubobi. An example of mubobi is the instance in which the competitor launches a committed attack without regard for personal safety. Some competitors throw themselves into a long reverse punch and are unable to block a counter. Should the offender receive an excessive contact and or sustain an injury, the referee will issue a Category 2 warning or penalty and decline to give a penalty to the opponent. This is one of the key points regarding issue number 1, which won't be discussed in this video. The second criticism is to say that we can't handle being hit hard on the head. Semi-contact rules does not incentivize body conditioning. That's no surprise. And that's not a problem because we're not competing in full contact tournaments. If we were to compete in full contact tournaments, then we'll just train for it. I don't see why that's a problem. Does semi-contact kumite makes us less conditioned towards impact than the average non-fighter? Definitely not. It makes us more conditioned, but just not as conditioned as full contact competitors. I don't see why that's a bad thing. Another criticism within this issue is that the better fighter lost. But better fighter in which format? The semi-contact format or the full contact format? If you say full contact format, no, we do not know who will be the better fighter because we did not witness them fighting in a full contact format. The performance that we witnessed, the strategies that they applied and how they trained for it was designed specifically for this semi-contact set of rules. So we don't actually know how they would strategize their game, train for it and perform if they were to fight in a full contact format. If I were to fight in a boxing or MMA match and I hit my opponent at the back of the head, what would happen? I would be given a warning or a point deducted because it's an illegal move in the sport. What if I hit him at the back of the head hard enough that I knock him out or until he is no longer fit to fight and that the match has to end? Who wins? Who loses? Should I be allowed to win by knockout or not? Well, certainly not. If it was allowed, it would not be an illegal move, and majority of the fighters would be attempting to do the same thing. It also shouldn't be a draw. If a draw is allowed, many losing fighters may attempt to do an illegal knockout to avoid adding a loss to their record. It is just appropriate for me to be disqualified. Yet, in a real-life physical altercation where you have to put down the assailant for your own safety, striking him at the back of the head to knock him down is a perfectly legitimate technique. In semi-contact kumite, strikes to the back of the head, the neck and the throat are allowed, but it has to be controlled. They are allowed to simulate such real-life possibilities and control to avoid long-term damage. Back to the illegal knockout MMA bout scenario, would it be correct for me to claim that I was the better fighter if it was an actual fight? Well, no, because if the technique weren't restricted, who knows how my opponent would strategize? If I were to claim that even within the MMA rules, I was the better fighter for the reasons that I was able to strike him at the back of the head and he couldn't, that would also be wrong. He didn't because he was fighting within the rules. So if you were to say that Hamedi was the better fighter even within the semi-contact format, but was unfairly penalized, you have to remind yourself what constitutes of semi-contact. He may be the better fighter, but he has to be penalized for that. Otherwise, it would not be a semi-contact bout. In order for a format to be semi-contact, it is necessary to penalize excessive uncontrolled impacts to the head. As I mentioned above, it is not that they are incapable of knocking out or knocking down their opponent. They just choose not to. They're able to control techniques that would otherwise be deadly. Besides, control is a very crucial aspect in traditional karate. Control over your emotions, control over your thoughts, your behavior, your attitude, your discipline, your words, your actions, and of course, your techniques. Shinji Tai, the mind or the heart, the technique or art, and the body or substance. After all, what is more powerful than power itself? It's control. Control over power is more powerful than power itself. In karate championships, you can be disqualified not just from the bout, but from the entire tournament if you lose control over your behavior or your words and acted maliciously. Similarly, you could be disqualified from a bout if you lose control over your techniques. Surely he meant no harm, but that's what control is all about. If control is expected, it is expected regardless of intent. Here's my last point against the argument that semi-contact is bad for the martial art, for karate. We already have a full contact version of karate. We've got Kyokushin, we've got kickboxing, and now karate combat. In fact, kickboxing evolved from karate in two different occasions, in two different countries, independently of each other. The first was in Japan in the 1950s to 60s, where a karateka and a boxing promoter worked together, studied Muay Thai to create a full contact ring sport entertainment version of karate. They called it Kikubokushin or kickboxing. Then in the US in 1970s to 80s, where the top karate competitors in semi-contact kumite worked together to develop a full contact ring sport entertainment version of karate as well. Initially it was called the Professional Karate Association. It's later renamed to Professional Karate and Kickboxing Association. So, like I said, we already have full contact versions of karate. Semi-contact kumite is a safer alternate competitive version of karate where we still can develop top quality striking techniques without needing to be worried about being knocked out or knocked down. Well, for the most part. Mistakes happen, and that's how martial arts are. Is there a good justifiable reason to restrict the world from having a safer option? This is where I go into diversity of knowledge. Genetic diversity. With genetic diversity, if a disease or a virus finds its way into a population, some will die, some will happen to be more resistant, some will be immune, and some will develop resistance. But if there's no diversity within the population, and a disease or virus finds its way into a population, if one dies, all die. And the same is true with knowledge and martial arts knowledge. If everyone thinks the same way, trains the same way, fights the same way, have the exact same skill sets, specializes in and are good at the same thing, does not specialize in and are not good at the same thing, then there's nothing we can learn from each other. Is that good for martial arts? On the other hand, if one group adopts a competition format that incentivizes a particular skill set and take that to the extreme, and then another group adopts a contrasting competition format that incentivizes a different skill set contrasting to the other group, and also take it to the extreme, where they could later learn from each other. Wouldn't that be good for the martial arts world? Is there any good justifiable reason to restrict the world from having other options? So thank you for watching. This is the first time I'm doing a video with an argumentative narrative. I did not plan to do one like this so soon. I initially planned to post my common type of videos, but I found that this topic is so relevant right now that I thought I needed to.
Do look out for 2 more videos relating to this topic. The first is on whether the referee and judges made the correct decision within the WKF rules to disqualify Hamedi. The second is my analysis comparing semi-contact kumite with Kyokushin full contact format, where I look into the pros and cons for varying scenarios and what they are designed to simulate.
So if you think there's any errors in my arguments, please go ahead and comment. So please like, share and subscribe.